Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Communications and Digital Committee, which is our first meeting of 2026. My name is Baroness Barbara Keeley and I'm the chair of the committee. We will be taking evidence from two sets of witnesses this afternoon in the final sessions of our inquiry into AI and copyright. I'm very pleased to welcome our first panel, who are representing Google and Charismatic AI. And I particularly want to thank them, as other platforms we asked to attend today didn't feel able to attend. So I'm very pleased that you two are able to come and do that. Today's sessions are being broadcast live, and a transcript will be taken. Our witnesses will have the opportunity to make corrections to that transcript where necessary. Can I ask if you'd just introduce yourself to the committee, starting with you, Roxanne Carter?
Of course, and thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Roxanne Carter. I work at Google in their Government Affairs and Public Policy team, and I lead on AI, copyright, news and media policy.
Thank you. And Guy Gadney?
Thank you. My name is Guy Gadney. I run an AI studio based in the UK called Charismatic AI, which has a generative story engine, which we've developed over the last couple of years alongside partners like Channel 4, Aardman, Animations, and funded by Innovate UK. I also sit as a trustee on the Story Museum in Oxford, looking at literacy among kids, and on Sheffield DocFest.
Thank you. Well, I want to start with our first question then, to open the discussion. And it's one that is quite key and central to all our deliberations on this committee. Would you agree that UK creative industries rights holders should receive payment or revenue share when their works are used by AI systems? Could I start with you, Roxanne?
Thank you, Chair. And can I start by saying that this is a very important and timely inquiry. From where we sit as Google and YouTube, we are both an AI model developer, but we also have a long-term history of partnership with the UK creative industries. We believe that the AI opportunity for the UK is significant, but we need an enabling copyright framework. And this isn't just impacting Google and Google DeepMind, which was founded in the UK, and with cutting-edge research and development, but it will have an impact on all other markets and sectors across the economy, where we want to be developing our own AI sovereign capabilities. We also want to ensure that UK users have AI tools that speak to British identity and culture. And we also want to make sure that the UK has a role on the global stage when we're thinking about AI development. So we need Parliament to strike a balance to ensure that the UK creative industries can continue to flourish whilst also enabling AI. And it's in that spirit of balance that we look at this issue of payment and remuneration. When it comes to training AI models on freely available content that is available on the open web, we do not believe that we should license that content. What the AI model is trying to do is analyze huge amounts of data to identify patterns and statistical relationships between words, language, concepts. It is not an information retrieval system. It is not a database. It is not looking to make copies. What it's trying to do is develop new tools to then produce wholly new content. But where we are seeing a market develop is for the access to content. And what do I mean by that? I mean for archived content, for specialized data sets, for content that may be off-platform in some way, or for opted-out content. And I know that that is something that we perhaps might come to later on. So from where we sit, we actually think that having a text and data mining exception here in the UK will help facilitate more licensing arrangements for access to content.
You're not really answering the question that I put to you. Do you think that creative industries rights holders should receive payment or revenue share? I think it is important that you do answer the question I'm putting.
So let me be clear here. I think it depends on if you're asking us to pay for every single piece of content for the training of the model, and if that content is freely available on the web, then no. But if you're asking us whether or not there should be deals for access to content that might be off-platform or archived, then yes, absolutely, and those deals are being done.
Thank you. Guy?
Thank you, Chair. So we have been operating as a small to medium enterprise in the UK in the field of AI in the creative industries for over 15 years now, which puts it at a slightly strange position of having seen a few cycles of this conversation going around. So the lens I look through to answer the question is through that lens of a company that is entrepreneurial in its nature, based in the UK. And I look at it through two lenses. One is morally. Morally, if anyone uses someone else's copyright material for commercial purposes, yes, there should be financial recognition. And that is my personal view. Legally, there is less clarity. And we need to look at this through the legal lens of what the current status of the precedents have been. And I go back to the US case of the Authors Guild versus Google between 2005 and 2015, a case which had used the word transformative away from the original copyright material for a new use specifically for training, and which Google won. So from a legal standpoint, I've yet to see clarity that enables us to either operate or have conversations with investors or other commercial entities on why AI systems should pay for copyrighted material in their training functions. I do think there is an urgent intervention for clarity from Parliament and from the legal systems, noting that a lot of the advances in the last week or so have been through legal cases brought as distinct from legislation.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to move on to a question from Baroness Wheatcroft.
Thank you. I'd particularly like to ask Roxanne, on the basis of your previous answer, I think what often concerns people is that what is trawled for training purposes from open sources with, as you would have it, no payment, can then be used not merely to train but to replicate the work of authors, and that they fear that effectively their creativity is going to be taken from them without any payment. And before we move on, I'd just like to know whether you think there is an issue there, and if so, how it should be dealt with.
So thank you for the question. When we are, certainly from the Google side, when we are designing these tools, the purpose is to then create wholly new content. And there have to be, to get to that point, you need to feed the model, for want of a better word, really huge data sets, really, really, really massive. And then that guards against bias, it ensures different perspectives. But if, for example, and I was trying to think of an analogy here, if, for example, in all the material you give the model, you just say peanut butter, peanut butter, peanut butter, it will analyse that across the data set and learn that peanut is followed, you then get butter after peanut. So it then doesn't capture peanut allergy. So we need to give it as much data as you possibly can. Now, to that point about replication, the more information, the more diverse information you can get, you then restrict that issue of replication. But these models shouldn't be replicating in the first place. I think there's a very, very rare case of memorization, and that was certainly, I think, what we were seeing at the beginning when these models were coming out. But there you have things like output filters and more technical controls that have been able to manage that. And I think what we're seeing now is that isn't happening as much as it originally was.
But the possibility remains there.
I don't think it does, actually. I think, at the beginning there was that risk. I think the models are now performing much better because they are designed to produce wholly new work.
And Guy, could I put the same question to you?
Thank you for the question. Well, as Roxanne says, the market's moving very fast, and certainly if you roll back a year ago, you would have that problem significantly. And remembering that there are two types of right that you're looking at here. Again, I'm not legally trained, so I put that as a very strong caveat. The first is copyright used for training, and the second one was, does the result look like something that is already copyrighted? And certainly we've seen a lot of instances of those since generative AI first came online. So I think there are two different categories there. Have we seen instances of outputs, generations that anyone has generated that would, by anyone's standards, infringe copyright? 100% yes. But as Roxanne said, as we've seen over the last little while, it takes a while for that technology to evolve, to determine whether or not something is copied and therefore has generated something that infringes copyright, and build the technologies to prevent that happening. So it is a moving feast. Does it happen at the moment? Yes. Can filters be put in place to stop it? Yes.
And how effective is rights reservation if I really want to make sure that my rights are not infringed? Does that work at the moment?
So there are two sides to this: rights around collection and rights reservation around preventing collection and then prevention of use. The recent case, which again was brought against resolved, which between Anthropic and the class action suit, which again was brought in the US from a law firm, actually resolved, had two principles, as you probably know. One was around collection and the other one was around usage, around piracy, where it where the class action succeeded was actually around piracy. It was not around the generation. So I think there is there are elements in this that are we're already seeing coming out in various responses. This also, I would say, goes back many years. The creative industries, music labels, publishers, and video companies have made occasional attempts going back to when I started in this industry, which is the mid-90s, as the first head of digital for Penguin Books. And there have been various rights reservation tools, strategies, and technologies put into place. Broadly, these have failed consistently over the past decades. As companies like Spotify and Apple Music have shown, actually, the solution to this is to be innovative and create a product which fills the vacuum and allows for new revenue streams to go back to the creators and meet what the market wants. For reference, by the way, we did a research around 2011 of online pirates, which was a difficult piece of research to do, that showed that the majority of these individuals were happy to pay for a subscription of around $10 to $15 per month if they could gain access to the music they wanted. That was prior to iTunes launching. So I think there is a real challenge technologically, practically, and from a will perspective of various organizations to put in place the technologies that allow this. But the solution to it is also very market-driven of what the audiences want at a particular moment in time. And I point as a positive example of this to the recent agreement between Disney and OpenAI, which will allow more playfulness in a broad term with the copyright that Disney owns.
Thank you. And building on that, Roxanne, do you think there is more that companies could do to make sure that opt-outs effectively are effective?
So we take a slightly different view. We believe that the current tools are effective. So they are built on robots.txt, which has been a standard that's well known for 30 odd years. It is simple, scalable, universally understood. The simplicity here, it is a feature, it is not a bug. And because of that, you are seeing the large media sites, for example, being able to opt out, as well as your, a small personal blogger. So we do see, in terms of having that choice and control to opt out your content from AI training, we are seeing the robots.txt mechanism as being effective, and the feedback that we've received from the ecosystem that we've been consulting with has been positive as well.
There seems to be a fear that if companies do opt out, they will not appear as they should on Google search. Now, can you put their minds at rest on that?
Yes, and thank you for the question, because I have watched previous sessions and I know that this has been a concern for the committee. The short answer is you can remain on search and yet still opt out of your content being used for AI training. When we were designing our generative AI tools, we launched a consultation and we spoke very widely with the web ecosystem. And one of the clear pieces of feedback that we got was they want to remain on search, but they want to have the control to opt out of their content used for AI training. So in 2023, we launched something called Google Extended, which sits in robots.txt, but is a standalone control that allows you to say yes to search, no to AI training.
And you can. That was 2023. Why are people still concerned?
Sorry?
That was 2023.
Yeah.
But there is still this concern.
Can I just intervene here? Because I think for those who haven't referred back to our earlier session, it was put to us in very, very strong terms about this issue. In fact, the witness told the committee in that earlier session that Google uses its search dominance to have an unfair advantage. That because you combine the search crawler with the crawler that accesses AI and performs AI summaries of contents and live AI searches, that is where the unfair advantage is. And unless this problem is addressed, stakeholders cannot create a fair marketplace for everyone. So it's a question of your place in the marketplace, I think, which clearly the Competitions and Market Authority is looking at. And others said similar things, that really the hold-up in trying to develop a fair marketplace was the lack of participation by Google, because you have that unfair advantage. And the comment was made that if Google isn't paying, no one else will either. We also heard from another witness who used to be a Google employee. Google is a bad actor in this, because if Google does not have to pay for content, then no one else is going to. So how do you answer that? I mean, surely that can't be those can't be labels that Google is proud of having.
No, absolutely not. If I can perhaps take them point by point. It is through Google Extended, you can opt out of search. No, sorry, you can opt out of AI training and remain on search. And you can see this if you go to the robots.txt controls for the BBC, for example, for the Daily Telegraph, for the FT. What I think the panelist was getting to in the last session was about how Gen AI features are being rolled out in search. That is a slightly different issue that is being tackled by the Competition Market Authority. So that is how those features are being, as the search project evolves, how those features are then being displayed.
Can I just clarify? They may be able to opt out of AI training, but can they opt out of AI overviews? Because that's affecting the number of clicks down the line, isn't it? So, are you saying that they can opt out of AI overviews?
So this is an issue that is a live, ongoing discussion with the CMA. So this is an ongoing process with them, and I'm not able to give more details at this time, but I'd be very happy to write back to the committee. We appreciate a consultation is due shortly, so we would like to keep you informed on that development.
Okay.
We'll be really interested to hear about that, because my understanding is that if you were to remove yourself from the AI training, then you have to turn no snippet on, and if you do that, you reduce click-through by 50%. So I'll be really interested to hear about that. And just then to go to the robots.txt point, my concern about leaning heavily on robots.txt is that it's not mandatory, and it's at a site level. And if you're an individual creator with an individual item that you want to protect, then you've got to negotiate all the different places that it might appear and what the robots.txt arrangement might be. And that feels inadequate. Do we not need, if an opt-out is to work, we need an opt-out that will work at an item level, not at a site level. Would you agree?
So one of the reasons that Google Extended works so well is because it is not a copyright control, it's a web publisher control. I think one of the challenges that we see is that nothing on the internet is labelled as copyright. There's the ambiguity issue. And so it's very hard for a tech platform to be able to identify and then police what is copyright protected, what is an orphan work, what's in the public domain. So that makes it extraordinarily complicated. I think the other issue with asset level opt-outs is that it's not clear to the tech, it won't be clear to the AI model developer what is being licensed to who, under what circumstances, for what time period. So this is a huge amount of data that you would have to, for example, have in a registry, a reliable registry, which just simply doesn't exist.
Crypto relies on reliable registries and happens at scale. This is not impossible technically, is it?
I think it could be, and I do think it could be. I'll slightly push back on that, only because if I look at my experience from the broadcasting side as well as the tech, licensing is incredibly fluid. You may choose to license your content to one entity tomorrow and then another licensing arrangement for the next day. And what is amazing about copyright is that it allows you to do that. So it's the fluidity, and then asking effectively the rights holder to manage a registry and keep it up to date all the time is, I don't think it's just an administrative hurdle. I think that's really consequential. I think that is very difficult.
I think we're leading into the questions that Viscount Colville wants to come on to. Can you come on to those now? Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for coming. We've heard a lot of evidence about transparency and the need for transparency both at a high level but also at a granular level. And we've also heard from your written evidence and from lots of other people who are doing AI developing how very expensive and difficult it is to give granular detail. Can I just ask you, and if you can give me a short answer, do you actually use third-party data collected for your LLMs?
So a short answer on that is that in trying to train the models and as much data as we possibly can, I would imagine that yes, and we're doing deals for licensed content, yes.
Great. I mean, if as that's the case, you've obviously got to be very careful about the sort of data that you're using. And you produced a paper in 2020, which was entitled Exploring the Limits of Transfer Learning with Unified Text-to-Text Transformer. And in it, you noted specific criteria that was needed for your AI models to clean up third-party data, which had been collected. And you have very specific criteria for clearing up that data. It says many pages had boilerplate policy notes. We removed any lines containing strings such as terms of use, privacy policy, cookie policy. If you can get that level of data while training your models, why would you oppose the reporting of granular data as too difficult? Don't forget about the competition and the security issue, but just out of the sheer difficulty issue. I'd really like your response.
Okay, so for us, transparency is important, and it has been a core value for Google. We were one of the first internet companies to publish a transparency report back in 2010. Specifically on copyright, we regularly publish copyright enforcement for both Google on search and YouTube. And we're trying to wrestle with this in a new era of AI. I worry that if you're asking us to provide URL by URL, a granular list, which I think is where this goes to, you are asking us to summarize the internet. The data sets are just so massive, and I think you've seen this in court cases as well, where trying to identify the needle in the haystack, it's not just that it's administratively difficult. It's just the scale of the operation is just too vast, even for Google. So,
I quite see that it's an enormous it is an enormous operation to try and get that detail. But if you've got this third-party data collected and you're using it in your before you use it, deploy it in your end-user models such as Gemini, surely you need to be absolutely clear whether or not any of this stuff is to be taken from the dark web, whether there's any C-spam on it. You need to have looked at a really granular level to make sure that you're cleansing that data properly, surely.
So we do. We look at it in terms of, and to your point, data sets, the data categorization. That is the level of granularity that we can get to. but that is not URL by URL.
What is it?
So it's the data sets. It's kind of like the bucket of, is this where is this? Is this licensed content? Is this crawled content? Is this publicly, publicly available data set in some way? So it's in those broad categories rather than specific URLs.
Those broad categories aren't going to tell you whether or not you've got C-spam and you're going to be deploying it in your end-user models. Are they? And you need to be able to be clear that that isn't going to happen, don't you? You need to have that sort of level of detail, don't you?
I would contend that it does, but I'm very happy to provide some more written feedback on this.
Great. Thank you very much, because obviously it would be really worrying if you didn't have that sort of detail.
Of course, absolutely.
And it seems to me that's much more than just a broad brush database. Okay, the other issue against granularity that you keep talking that you and many other developers have talked about is that it will create both a security and a competition risk. Various people have come up with ideas for how you can deal with that. But one of the things that seems to be most effective is the idea of a black box, which could be held by the regulator or could be held by the AI Safety Institute. And apparently this is done in competition law already. And what you would do is you would put your LLM entire database into a black box, and then the rights holder would be able to get their discrete information that would have come from that LLM. You wouldn't in that way be disclosing the whole set, therefore you wouldn't be putting it to some sort of competition risk or some sort of security risk, but you would then be allowing the rights holder to be able to find out whether or not they have got any content that has been included and not paid for in the LLM training. I mean, what's your response to that suggestion?
So I've not heard this particular proposal, and it's one that I would like to go back to the company with. I know that this is a very live conversation in many, many jurisdictions as we try to grapple with what does transparency look like. And I know, for example, we've had very detailed conversations in Europe where we focused on, I think the words are a sufficiently detailed summary, which is kind of contradictory. So I think finding new solutions is important and worthy of discussion, but I would like to stress that where we are seeing those transparency discussions happen, it's where a text and data mining exception already exists. And so that bigger picture of having the enabling legal framework to allow for the training is important, and then to look at the transparency solutions that might be available.
I mean, you're a senior executive from Google. You haven't heard this black box suggestion. I'm quite surprised. But anyway, what is your immediate instinct? Why would that be a threat to either your security or your competitiveness?
I would really need to look at the details, but happy to do so. Happy to, if you're able to provide that to me, I'd be very happy to take that back and then get back to you with more details in writing.
What would happen if our recommendation was that there should be granular detail of the data collected in LLMs, and that there was then regulation put out to support that? What effect would that have on Google rolling out its models in this country?
I think we'd have to see what the specific details of that are. I think, again, these are live conversations in other jurisdictions as well. It's something that we take very seriously. We want to engage constructively in debates on transparency. That was part of the reason that we signed the Code of Practice in Europe, so that we could be part of that collaborative discussion. So I think we'd have to see the details, and we'd have to kind of calibrate on what was the requirement.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I have been rather Google-centric in my questions. This is something that you might not have thought about, but has been put to me. There are these open source LLMs, particularly there's one being run by the Allen Institute in America, set up by Paul Allen from Microsoft. And they've come up with an LLM which is called Olmo 3 AI, and apparently it was built for just $90 million. And part of its selling point is that it is open about the way that it's trained. It's open about what the training decisions are, what the data used are. Wouldn't that be something that we should be rolling out in this country and encouraging a similar sort of UK open source AI model based on copyright cleared UK material?
Thank you for the question. Yes, and I think going back to what we're talking about transparency, transparency is a word that I've yet to see a good definition of at the moment, and especially when it's applied to technology, which can go down into multiple granular levels and linguistically is complex. We need to be very clear on what we're talking about. And your last question to Roxanne just then around whether or not there would be an advantage in the US versus UK in terms of access to those models is very pertinent, because we see that it is very important that we as a country can operate competitively and that we have access to the latest technologies to be able to compete with our international competitors. At the moment, I would say we're struggling because overseas territories have access to Google models and other models most commonly before we do as a nation. That may be a short amount of time, only 2 or 3 weeks. But in this world, 2 weeks is a long time to be able to get a competitive foothold. So I would caution any form of legislation that would prejudice either the entrepreneurial and nascent creative AI sector and or the creative industries. To your point about the open and I suppose ethically, tick-boxed in whatever form we want to call it, models, of course we'd welcome that. We've been lobbying for a while for a sovereign large language model in the UK that is not only able to have all of the data processing done in this country, but is also trained on data which is both sourced and remunerated properly, and UK copyright and UK material as well. I don't think that having solely UK content would generate a model that would be competitive internationally. But certainly your price figure for Mo3 of $90 million is indicative of how the comments that were made previously by larger tech companies around it is impossible to do a new large language model, it's simply prohibitively expensive, were false. And I think we're seeing the ability for more innovation around this sector coming up very rapidly. And I would urge this country to do more on that sector as well. We've yet to see something like Olmo 3 appear in the UK, and there is absolutely no reason I can see why that shouldn't have happened already.
Should the government be doing something to encourage those sort of open source models to take place here?
Yeah, I absolutely believe so, and I think this is where there is an urgent need for an intervention at a significant level, both in terms of the technology that sits on it and the use cases that enable that large language model. As Google and others have shown, it's not just about having a piece of technology, it's what you can produce with that piece of technology that can inspire other people to create with it. As I go back to the Google Books versus Authors Guild case, it is not a commonly referenced case. Largely my personal view is because you couldn't see what was going on. But over the last couple of years, as we've started to see image generation and video generation coming out, people have said, this looks like Mickey Mouse, doesn't it? And it's presented a very visible issue for it. So to me, it's not only a question of building the technology, but to provide that technology for a particular industrial sector. And I would urge that that's the creative sector, to be able to showcase what it can do. And by the way, what we can do as a country. We are an astonishingly powerful, creative country, and human data is vital for this. If we can have something that can showcase that and support our creative industries, I'd back it 100%.
Thank you very much indeed.
Before we leave the question of transparency, there have been concerns raised with me and members of the committee about the issues that are raised around X and XAI and Grok. And it goes back to this question about being ready to reveal what training data has been used by AI models. Can you, Roxanne, for Google, give assurances that you know exactly what material goes into the training of your models, especially those that are offered to the public sector?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So, when it comes to training the models, we need, as I said, to train on a huge amount of data. It is not just that you want high quality data, you need the good, the bad, and in cases the ugly as well. So for example, if you are training the model to be safe, you need to show it what is harmful. If you are training a model to tackle spam, it needs to be able to analyze spam. But you need to have the safeguards that it learns from it or analyzes this information, but then doesn't seek to produce that content. And there we take that commitment incredibly seriously. This is not the sort of content that we want to see on our platform. When we have been designing our tools, we've invested in safety right from the get-go. We have very strict policies, but we also have guardrails to ensure that the type of problematic outputs, such as violent, offensive, or sexually explicit content, is not shared and generated.
If then your models are ranging over the bad as well as the good, as you've touched on, how is the content of your training data detailed and listed out? And do you share that information? Do you share it with the UK Safety AI Institute?
I would need to, I know that we publish AI model cards. I would need to go back and check who we shared that with. So I will report back to the committee.
Okay, I think that would be helpful. Can we come to Baroness Healy's questions?
Thanks very much. The committee is very interested in the question of licensing, and that's what I want to return to now, because we've heard that one of the main obstacles to the development of a licensing market is a lack of willingness to engage from AI companies, and I'm just wondering what your view on that is. Is that a fair comment, or is it because you're waiting to see what the outcome of the government's consultation is? So if I may start with Ms. Carter.
Thank you for the question. We have a long track record of doing licensing deals and seeking commercial partnerships with the UK creative industries. So whether or not you're looking at YouTube, where we license for use on the platform, we also license directly with partners, but also with PRS. We have deals with Lyric Finder on search. We have, for News Showcase, over 280 publications that we cover through that scaled solution. We license for content. I think this comes to what are we licensing for? And what we discussed at the beginning, we don't believe that we need a license to train. But we are doing licenses for access. And we are seeing that more and more, so we've done deals, we've just rolled out an AI pilot with news organisations. The Guardian is part of that. And that's something that we're keen to roll out to more news publishers over the coming months. But we've also done deals, for example, with Bloomsbury, with Imperial, where we want to make sure that we have specific UK content included into the training of AI models. So these deals are being done. I, again, would say that having a text and data mining exception gives the clarity over what we're paying for, and I think that would turbocharge more of these commercial deals being done.
Thank you. And Mr. Gadney, I'd be interested in your view, because you're obviously coming from a different perspective in terms of the smaller AI companies and your relationship with the creative sector.
Thank you for the question. So I first started licensing creative works for digital media in the mid-90s when, as I mentioned, I was head of digital for Penguin Books. And so the specific case was we wanted to license, I think, 10 30-second music clips for a CD-ROM database for music. At that point, we were charged, I believe, or quoted £250,000 in that moment in time, which, if I extrapolate today, is around £600,000 for 10 30-second clips. In essence, that was a no in terms of the license that we wanted that we sought. More recently, we developed a video game adaptation of John Wyndham's book, The Kraken Wakes. We licensed the content for that as an adaptation and went through the appropriate channels. That took over a year to secure the license for that particular instance. And we've been tracking this for quite some period of time, fairly obviously. To my mind, there are two sides to the coin. One is the large-scale licensing that your question to Google implies. The other one is a license for use in creative and specific instances. From that, I would say that my count is that the creative industries who look after the creators, and remember we're very creator-centric. We want to see the creators being remunerated appropriately and beneficially. And it is important to say that I think that the industries, the labels, the publishers, the agents that exist to monetize the works have not done a good job in keeping up with technological innovation. It's their job to innovate the ways in which they can benefit the creators who they represent. I would not advocate them preferring protection and blocking rather than engagement and experimentation. Historically, technologically, that has not worked for the creative sectors, and it's not worked for the creators. As we move into an economy now which is largely a creator economy, so-called creator economy, and I note that 1 in 4, research says that 1 in 4 people in the UK identify as creators. This is a significant movement. It is very important that the creative industries and the creators respond to this and engage with this process. I note that our international AI competitors are on the track already. They're in the stadium and running laps. It does feel, in the current process of this debate, like this country cannot decide whether to enter the stadium at all. If AI is seen as a productivity growth engine, we need leadership to be more decisive, pragmatic, and creative in their thinking, seeking to grow and support the creative sectors as they innovate into this sector.
Thank you. Well, following on from that, I mean, what specific steps should the government and regulators take to help create a coherent and sustainable licensing environment? And I'm also interested in your view on the government's proposal on the creative content exchange. Do you think that's something that's worth looking at?
This me.
You, Mr. Gadney, sorry.
Thank you. We engaged at the beginning with, under the umbrella of CoStar, the government-funded research initiative, which has pulled together a proposal called ACCT, which is looking at a transparency. It stands for Access, Control, Consent, Compensation and Transparency Technology Framework that, as you were referencing, is blockchain enabled, so supports the sort of flexibility, fluidity and speed at which these sorts of licensing agreements need to happen. I note also that the very nature of content, what we've talked about a lot today, is quite, so far has been quite monolithic. There is a work and that is licensed for a particular purpose. The nature of content at the moment is much faster than that, much more playful. There's a lot of modding of taking one piece of content and moving it into another at light speed. So for that particular piece, we engaged with that organisation, which again was a cross-sector and technological proposal. And this has been tabled with DCMS since Q2 last year and could be developed, implemented and leveraged by the AI companies that you referred to. So my proposal would be down those tracks to have something that we can launch, test in the market.
Okay, and Ms. Carter, I mean, what do you think the role of the government regulators should take in order to increase the access for AI companies?
So here I would like to take a step back and just say the UK is a hugely significant market for us. It's been home for Google for 20 years, and we've just announced a $5 billion investment that will span over 2 years, $1 billion of which goes to create a new data centre. But having an enabling copyright framework is an important factor in this. And so for us, having a text and data mining exception that builds on the non-commercial one that already exists in the UK to a commercial is quite an important feature that we would like to see adopted by the Parliament. When it comes to the creative content exchange, I think these sorts of mechanisms can be helpful. I think that they can be very useful in terms of pooling together some of the smaller creators. Again, we'd like to see more details. I think it would, again, if you're asking an entity to map out and try and put a price tag on every single piece of content on the internet, that's that's a challenge. But I think if you are pulling this together to reach voluntary agreements so that you get the smaller players to come to the market as well, I think that could be very useful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Given what you've just mentioned, Ms. Carter, about the investment, I want to ask you how important are investment in the UK that you mentioned, the 5 billion figure. How important are different factors in that decision? Obviously, we want to see in this, we want to see the development of continually of high quality human created content, but we do have the UK copyright framework. What were the factors that governed or shaped your decisions about where to invest in and develop AI, balancing out? You mentioned a data center, for instance. What are the factors that balance out there?
So I appreciate that there will be many different considerations, but I come back to the copyright framework is important. It is an important factor. So trying to get that right balance, and I want to be at pains about the importance of getting the balance right. You know, I mentioned at the beginning, the creative industries is incredibly important to Google, and we see them as a partner. So we want to make sure that we get that balance of ensuring they can continue to thrive and flourish, as well as allowing AI innovation to take off in the UK. So getting that balanced copyright framework is a top consideration for us.
Yeah, I did read out to you the comments that were made to us by witnesses that described Google as a bad actor, that talked about you taking unfair advantages in the market. It's a curious thing for you to say how much you value the creative sector at the same time as you were viewed in that way, in taking an unfair advantage in your search and crawler, and not paying for training data. How do you? I come back to how do you answer those? Because it's great to talk about partnership, but I think to the creative sector there doesn't look to be much partnership in that sort of behaviour.
So if I may, I think the comment of bad actor came from, I may have this correct, from the representative of Cloudflare.
No, it wasn't.
Was it not?
No, it wasn't. No.
Okay. So I don't believe that we are being a bad actor. I think that we are, like I said, we partner with the industry. We're very keen to develop and grow AI tools, but at the same time, the long tail of human creativity on the web matters. And so that is something that we are constantly striving to deliver on. Like we discussed, we're doing deals. Those deals, we've done pilots, those will be rolled out, and we continue to do more deals. So I disagree with the framing of Google being a bad actor.
I think it's a combination of the not paying, because I think we're juggling in all the questions that we've asked you on licensing, trying to develop a licensing market, but everything hinges on, in many ways, on this remuneration question and being prepared to pay for use of data for training. And it was very strongly put to us that if Google won't pay, and you're a big player in this market, why should other people play? So there's a leadership role there. I just reflect back to you that it comes a bit hollow to talk about partnership with the creative sector if you're one of the players who take advantage and won't pay. So that's a point I can just leave you with, unless you want to make any more reflections on it.
Just to reiterate, it's not a question of that we won't pay. I think we need the certainty as to what we are paying for, and then those deals are already being done, and we will continue to do those deals.
Anything to add before we conclude?
I applaud that Roxanne and Google value the creative industries. My comment is it's not valued enough. Putting value on needs to be quantified, not just said. Secondly, the payment terms that we've started to see coming out of settlements are one-offs to creators through the Anthropic case. That is unacceptable. Unacceptable. In a traditional licensing model where trailing revenues, you talk about the long tail, is not accepted as part of the deal. Any traditional licensing model usually has some form of revenue share or points associated with it. The one-off deal, which does not work, having spoken to writers, in my opinion, something needs to be more done around that long tail that we talk about. Secondly, we've seen a huge shift in revenues. We must acknowledge the shift in revenues from traditional media that we talk about. Revenue has shifted over 60% from linear to digital platforms over the last 10 years. Advertising income has shifted over 77% onto platforms like Google and Meta and other advertising things. That has had an enormous impact, as we know, on our national linear advertising networks. Those networks commission content. They do not look at the long tail, they look at the short tail. They look at commissioning, funding content that we talk about as copyright material, and they forget copyright for a second, because I believe it can be a cloak. The copyright debate can be a cloak towards actually what we're talking about, which is money. In a very un-British way, let's start talking about money, follow the money, look at where the money is going, who has it, and how much of that money is getting through to creators themselves. Those are the people who are creating the content. That is a healthy ecosystem. That as a nation is what we're good at. The trouble about supporting the long tail is it implies the content already has to exist. Who is funding the creation of that content? Yes, we can create now content at incredibly low cost. That's great. And there's an argument that we can democratize that content. That doesn't mean that people should not eat or have an unsustainable lifestyle simply as they have to then create this and rely on a long tail, which is substantially less than the existing model. So I would urge that as we're looking into this sort of model, we look at the money and we look at how we can support the creation of the content as well as the long tail remuneration for it.
Okay, thank you very much. We started with a question of payment or revenue share, and we end on the same topic. Let's look at the money. Thank you both very much indeed. And we'll close the session there and just take a few moments before our next session starts. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Second half of our session today, the government's work on AI and copyright is being led jointly by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport and the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. So I'm delighted that we have the Secretary of State of both departments with us here today. Thank you so much for coming. And could each of you introduce could the staff members who came with you introduce themselves, whichever way you prefer to do it?
Do you want to introduce?
I'm very happy to do that. Hello, I'm Ruth Hallant. I'm the Director General for Society, Media and Culture at the DCMS.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ollie Eilert. I'm the Director General for AI at DSET.
Thank you. I don't think our Secretary of State need much introduction, but you are welcome. Before we turn to the main topic of today's session, which is AI and copyright, I would like to comment on the recent serious issues regarding X's AI chatbot Grok. We are all, speaking for all the committee, appalled by reports that Grok has been used to create non-consensual intimate images of women and children. This is a vile form of abuse. And I do thank Secretary of State Liz Kendall for her letter to me on this yesterday, which committee members have all seen. We welcome the government's announcement that it's bringing legislation into force this week to tackle this issue. We also welcome the news that Ofcom has launched a formal investigation to determine whether X has complied with its duties under the Online Safety Act. We expect, as I know the Secretary of State has said she expects, them to act urgently, and that's very important, I think. We do also support the government's intention, which was stated in the letter, to act on the gaps identified in our online safety legislation, such as the fact that not all chatbots are covered by the Online Safety Act. Now, we have some detailed questions later in the panel about transparency, and that we've been working on that as an issue in AI and copyright. And while we focused on that issue, mainly related to copyright, there is a view emerging that it's impossible to fully assess or mitigate the risks of harmful or illegal outputs, as we've been seeing in the case of X and Grok, without granular transparency over AI inputs, and particularly on what data models are trained on. And you know, if there are harmful images coming out of a chatbot like Grok, you know, how was it trained, and where were those? How are those still in there? But we will come on to that. I want to turn now to the topic of our current inquiry, which is AI and copyright. So we read with interest the progress statement that the government published in December. It showed that the overwhelming majority of respondents to the AI and copyright consultation wanted AI companies to pay for their training data, and only a very small minority supported any new copyright exception for AI training. In the light of this, I would like to ask the ministers, will you now follow the Australian government and rule out introducing a broad new text and data mining exception in the UK? So,
I'll start. Just to say thank you to the committee for inviting us, and I'm really glad you're looking in detail at this question. Very important to the government, to the country, and I would say to myself and Lisa personally. You will have, I know, all sorts of individual questions that you want to ask about what we are going to do, and you may get annoyed with the broad answer that I give, which is we are having a genuine reset moment. We are genuinely trying to find a way forward that seeks to back and champion our incredible world-leading creative industry, the people who work in it, because we think it's so important, not just for our economy, but for our country, but that also manages to seize the potential opportunities that AI brings for not just for jobs and growth, though that is vital, but for all the other huge benefits, the positive ways that AI can be used. And you will know that we have committed in the legislation to bringing forward a report by the 18th of March, which will do a whole range of things, including setting out the way forward. So we are genuinely consulting. We are developing our proposals, so we don't have a list of areas that we can promise to you, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, because we are genuinely consulting to try and find a way forward. I would say that I know the issue of reward is incredibly important for creatives. So too is control of their art, what they produce, controlling that, and also being rewarded for it. One of the things that was crystal clear in the consultation was just how important and fundamental it is for the creative sector to have those two issues at the heart of the way forward.
It's worth, I take your point about the reset and the fact that you're consulting, but it's worth saying that we've had reflected to us from the creative sector great warmth towards what the Australian government has done in setting out that it is not going forward with a text and data mining exception. So if I can encourage you to keep looking at that.
We are looking, I would say, at in detail at what other countries are doing.
I was just going to say that, I mean, the short answer, as Liz has said, is that we haven't made a decision yet, because I, for one, have really welcomed this moment where we've looked at the consultation responses. As you said, Chair, very rightly, there was an overwhelming preference for one of those models, and it wasn't the government's original preferred model. I think one of the learning points for this government has been that it was a mistake to start with a preferred model, the opt-out model. What we learnt through that consultation is that there's very different implications for different parts of the creative industries from the different models, and we have to take a far more nuanced approach to this and work with different parts of the creative industries to address their very serious and in some cases existential challenge that is posed by the current system, let alone any changes that we may make. I think we also have learned from looking at the experience of other countries. You've obviously got Australia over here, you've got the EU here, and you've got the United States there, that there is no perfect solution to this, and that no country yet has managed to find an approach that doesn't have detrimental consequences to the two objectives that Liz set out. We believe in the potential of AI to this country. We believe in the power of our creative industries. We think both are going to be absolutely essential to the government's growth mission. And there is no model out there in the world to follow that has got this completely right yet. So we are genuinely working through this in a far richer conversation through the working groups, where instead of having two very antagonistic poles on the landscape, we've brought tech companies together with the creatives, and what we're finding actually is that there is a broad consensus forming in the middle around the proper role of government, around the proper role of industry to reach its own agreements, and around the things that government absolutely needs to do, including this issue about remuneration and fairness that Liz talked about, but also transparency in order to try and solve this. So I appreciate that, as Liz said, that is really very frustrating for the committee that we've come here without the perfect answer. But please do rest assured that we're taking it seriously, and we know there is an urgency around it.
Okay, thanks. Well, it's early January now, and as Liz has touched on, the government is committed to publish that economic impact assessment and full report on AI and copyright in March. Will you take a definitive position on your approach to AI and copyright at that point, do you think? Is it feeling like you will be able to take a definitive position on your approach at that point?
So I think one of the things we learnt last time that was coming out with the preferred option was that not a terribly popular preferred option, but that was probably the wrong approach. So we haven't decided that completely yet, but that's certainly one of the lessons I've learned.
We're keen to be able to provide clarity around this as soon as possible. From the working groups, that has been the number one thing that has emerged from both tech companies and from creatives, is that they need clarity and certainty, and we want to do that. But as Liz has said previously, if we rush into this and we get it wrong, we could make a mess. So we're not going to rush into it. We are going to take the time to work through with the working groups, but we appreciate that there's an urgency around this, and we want to move as quickly as possible.
Yeah. What specific further evidence are you seeking then that you don't already have from the consultation, from the working groups which restarted before Christmas and other engagement? What further evidence is needed?
We're trying to divvy this up so that we don't keep repeating each other, because we want to get through all your questions. But just as a sort of first go at answering that question, the working groups have surfaced a few key. I mean, there's lots of things that have come out of them, but a few key things. One is, and it sort of relates to the issue you were talking about at the start, Chair, around Grok, and the recent action that the Secretary of State has taken, is around the insufficient protection for what we sort of refer to as the creator's essence. So things like voice and style. We've heard some really quite stark examples of where, for example, children's characters have been used as part of ChatGPT to enable children to talk to those characters in some very inappropriate ways, including very sexualized conversations. Now, it's not just a question about what that means in terms of safety. It's also a question about personality rights and other issues which you'll be aware of. There's insufficient technical tools at the moment for some of the transparency requirements that we as a government have committed to. And one of the things that we're doing is working with industry, urging them to try and find the solutions to that. The working groups have also surfaced the need for transparent processes underpinned by legislation. I think that has been universally understood, especially around the issue of crawlers and the use of crawlers, which is particularly for publishing, posing a really serious challenge. And then the other thing that I just wanted to put in front of the committee, because I think this is potentially contested, but there is a strong view from the working group that the government ought to be focusing on creating the right conditions and frameworks, so issues like transparency, not intervening overly in licensing deals, which industry is already coming together to reach. And so a demarcation of the roles, essentially, where creatives and tech companies are finding their own solutions to some of those challenges, but there are certain things that they can't do that government ought to do. So that is why we're still doing this process through the working groups, because it has actually surfaced that there are some areas where it needs further work.
And there'll be more meetings of the working groups, adding more people in, getting more information. So we've done one round of those, but I think there will be more in February.
Thank you. Come to Baroness Owen now, Charlotte.
Thank you. So the committee is keen to find out more about the progress that's been made to address concerns about the limitations of the existing opt-out system or rights reservation models, and ensure that any proposed solution would be workable for both the rights holders and the AI developers of different sizes. We just heard on the last panel Google say that this option was working effectively. However, the committee has also heard evidence which says that it's a poor fit for complex copyright ownership, and that they only work for right holders who control their own domain, and AI crawlers are simply ignoring robots TXT. So I'd be keen to get your perspective. Is it an Ollie question?
Yeah, so we've had lots of conversations, both in bilateral engagement and through the technical working groups, on opt-out approaches. So it's worth saying the UK doesn't currently have an opt-out approach because we don't have a broad exemption. So opt-outs are relevant where countries have gone down the route of creating exemption, and then the opt-out plays into that. I think when it comes to the implementation of those, we've heard lots of views actually. So one view that we've heard expressed is that the opt-out system places a regulatory burden on the rights holder because they have to exercise that opt-out. And if you are a smaller operator, you might be a creative operating under your own, that put some burden on you to sort of go through and make sure that that's expressed properly, and this might be technical. You need some kind of interface there to help you do that. I think the other thing we've heard, of course, is that if the opt-out process becomes extremely straightforward, then everyone just withdraws their material from the market. Now, that might be fine in some sense, but if you went down the route of creating an exemption, it would be because you wanted people to access the material for training, and if everyone withdraws, then you've undermined the primary policy goal that you've set out there. I think the other thing that we'd have to bear in mind is when you really focus in on the granularity of how is some of these this material encoded on the internet, it becomes hard, the technical challenges in how you kind of figure out, does an opt-out apply to this? So for example, if I wrote and published a blog that was a book review, and in the course of that I was quoting from a novel, there's nothing in my blog which creates metadata that says this is my paragraph, this is the author's paragraph, this is my paragraph coming back through again. So if that author has exercised an opt-out somewhere, how do you know that it attaches to the blog that I might then have published? So I think with the opt-out, we obviously have had lots of views on the idea of an opt-out as a core policy proposition in the response to the consultation. But in going through these technical working groups, we've also waded into lots of the difficulties of implementation. And obviously the EU is going down this process as well, and we'll see how that plays out this year.
So just to push the final part of the question, do you think the proposed solution, if they went down an opt-out model, would be workable for rights holders of different sizes? Just to really pin you on an answer on that.
I think as the Secretaries of State have said, the process of figuring out how you practically deliver something would take time to work through.
So just to add to that, I think that the straight answer to that question is that there are challenges with the opt-out process that we hadn't anticipated or fully understood before we did the consultation that we don't currently know how to surmount. So it doesn't mean that they're insurmountable, but we don't currently have the answers to those. So at the moment, we don't have a workable opt-out proposal on the table. And particularly, I think if you had the publishing industry here, you would hear this view expressed very, very clearly, is the underlining all of the challenges that Ollie just set out with what opt-out actually means in practice.
And also, neither the large nor the small AI companies, lots of them didn't support it either, for different reasons.
Thank you. So what would you see as the government's role in any rights reservation or opt-out solution, and what do you view as a section that should just be left to industry? So where's the line between what industry does and what you anticipate government will do?
I think the point that Lisa made earlier about what is the role of government in this, what is it only we can do, what is it that can be something that's worked out within or between the different sectors. You are understandably tempting me down a road of the opt-out when to set out what our role would be. I understand you asking me that, but that would tend to suggest that we are backing that particular option. And we know why we put the reason that option forward, but we also have heard loud and clear from across the board why that's been rejected. I think one of the things as well I would say that hasn't come up is, certainly one of the reasons why the creative sector haven't liked it is because many would argue their permission should be sought, not have to opt out. Yeah. And from the AI perspective, we had a very strong response from people like the Startup Coalition who said that wouldn't work for small companies. Yeah. So there are a number of different concerns with it. So going through what our role would be in an option that has obviously got problems, you will forgive me for sort of holding fire on that.
And could I just add to that a couple of things that have really helped clarify my thinking, I think our thinking around the working groups. I think it is the role of industry to find technical solutions to some of these challenges, not the role of government. And we have a role in urging industry to do that, which we've been playing. But the fact that it's very difficult to enforce rights that even currently exist, let alone in a new system, I think there is a responsibility on industry to find a solution to that. And so we've been talking to the tech companies about that. And actually some of that work is happening at the moment. There's some really interesting organisations out there, people like Cloudflare and others who are finding their own solutions to this. The second thing that I think is a proper role for industry is around reaching licensing agreements, because I think what we've seen through the agreements and the deals that have already been done is that they are much more attuned to the nuances in their own industries. And like I said before, there are very different impacts on different parts of the creative industries. Where I think there is a very strong role for government is obviously industry itself can't introduce requirements around things like transparency, and that's something that as a government we've committed to, and that can't be done without the intervention of government, so we see that as part of our proper role. Similarly, as Liz was alluding to, you've got, a lot of the deals that have been done have worked very well for the bigger players. They don't necessarily work well for the smaller players. Now, we're as concerned about them as we are about the bigger players, not least because the creative industries are an ecosystem, and your Ed Sheeran start somewhere, and so we've got to make sure that we're protecting those people as well. I think that is a role for government in stepping in where those deals are not necessarily serving the creative industries as a whole, and making sure that we make this work for tech companies and for creatives.
Can I just go back to you commented about Cloudflare, and we did have a discussion with Google in the last session around various issues in the market, but the witness we had from Cloudflare in December really called out Google and the fact that there's an imbalance in the market caused by Google having the unfair advantage that they have from combining their search with web crawlers. And I mean, obviously, there's a role in there for the CMA, but they have said it will give publishers more control over their content by giving them greater choice of how their content is used by Google. But that only deals with that tech platform, doesn't it? And I think that there's a big question about what the government could do, or could you start to take account of a role in addressing the fact that there's a bargaining power imbalance. So publishers feel that they can't get fair terms. It's a sort of David and Goliath situation, and the Goliath, if the Goliath is Google, then they have this very large advantage.
I mean, it's interesting, again, if you look at what different approaches of other countries, and Ollie will correct me if I'm wrong, but India's approach is, a sort of statutory licensing, where they take, essentially make sure that that's required and then distributed, whether it's bigger or smaller. But the problem with that is that that sort of depends on there being an opt-out approach, and many creatives actually told us that was the thing that they disliked most of all, because they wanted control beforehand. So there's each way that you come at this, there are challenges. Now, obviously, to govern is to choose, and that's what we intend to do. But what's been interesting about these discussions is both, from the technical perspective, and Lisa's absolutely right, that is not for us to do, that is for the companies. But thinking about all the different players in the ecosystem, large and small, on the AI side as well as the creative side, we have to have a system that understands the big players come from small minnows to start with, and we need a system that works for all.
Yeah, and there's also, this conversation about Google we've also had with the publishing industry in particular. When we started this process, there was a particular concern about the role that Google plays because of the search engines. So, opting out means opting out of the search engine, then you've effectively killed off your business before you've started. What's emerged as a stronger concern since then is these AI summaries that you get when you use Google, and the way in which I don't think there's a concern particularly around the AI summaries. There's a concern when the AI summaries become a competitor to the original product, using the original product in order to create another article that then is used by people instead of the original. And I think that is just an illustration of the challenge in this area, because it is so fast moving that new technologies are being developed all the time that are throwing up new challenges that people debating this 3 or 4 years ago wouldn't even been able to foresee. Now, the challenge that Liz and I have got is that we're trying to foresee where this is going in the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years' time, even as technology is being invented that wasn't even dreamt of a few years ago. And so, we really do welcome this inquiry, and we welcome the work of this committee and the committee and the other committees in the other place that have looked at it, because it is quite a formidable challenge to get this right.
Can I just come in on some of the international comparisons the Secretary of State mentioned? So as the Secretary of State mentioned with India, when your question was about bargaining and bargaining power, so on the 8th of December, India published a working paper on which they invited comments, and the proposal they included in that was the idea that users would have to pay a predetermined royalty as compensation for rights holders. So you get people paying in there, and then that would enable lawful access. The challenge is that that comes in the Indian paper without an opt-out. Without an opt-out, because if you said there was a compulsory license royalty payment that you had to make, but then people could opt out of it, then you would have to negotiate that with those people to get them back into it, and then you're sort of just back into the same position of negotiating to conduct licensing. But it's worth saying this is also an issue that's come up in Australia. So Australia has announced before Christmas that they wouldn't go down the route of an exemption. They've set out some of the work they want to do, because there's obviously still a lot more detail for them to work through. One of the things they've said they want to look at is whether they also need a paid collective licensing framework onto their Copyright Act, or whether to leave it to the voluntary licensing framework that they currently have. So lots of people working through this same set of issues.
Yeah,
thank you for correcting.
It's worth saying that the AI overview issue it has two issues, doesn't it? One, if you strip out the website links, you're not linking to the brand anymore, so you're not going to a particular newspaper or the BBC or whatever. But I was in a situation on a plane recently and looking at AI overviews, which is all I could get access to because there was no internet. And there's a whole thing about, oh, I see. Well, do I trust that answer? So there's a sort of media literacy point there as well. Yeah. If what you get is not the article, from the newspaper or the BBC, but a summary.
Although trusting the answers we read is not just a question for AI, is it? I mean, it's a much broader issue.
No, but it's the action of the AI overview stripping out the links so that you can't even go and check it for yourself. I think. I mean, the work we did on media literacy in the first part of this year, we were very keen to get the message across about the necessity of checking. Yet these developments take that away.
Yeah, and we really recognise that. I mean, one of the pieces of work that my department is looking at is around trust in media as a priority and whether people can trust what they're seeing and hearing. You may have heard me say before, but we are looking as a priority around the blurring of facts and opinion, and looking at issues like serving politicians, presenting news programmes, for example. But I do see this as part of that whole, is that if people can't look at the source and see the source, then we're disempowering people from being able to come to informed views about whether what they're reading is accurate. So there are other challenges as well that we need to address. What I don't want to suggest is that as a government we only see AI as a problem, because the creative industries are increasingly at the forefront of AI and using AI to advance their work. And although there are serious challenges, and we won't shy away from that as a government, and we've heard those loud and clear, there is also a very strong view coming from the creative industries that AI is an absolutely essential component in their future. And similarly, there's a really strong view coming from companies that are at the forefront of the AI revolution, that they need access to great quality human content and data that only comes from creative industries. So actually the two are very bound together, and the futures are intrinsically intertwined. And although there are these serious challenges, if we get this right, there is a great prize to be won.
There is, yeah. I'll come to Jim Knight now. Jim.
Thank you both for coming. Thank you for restating your commitment to transparency, which is clearly fundamental if we're going to get a regime that works, and in particular if we get a UK licensing market that is vibrant and drives growth that we need in the economy. As the Chair alluded to earlier, we've had this issue with Grok that you've responded to, and the training data that will have been used for Grok, you'd have to assume included quite a lot of harmful data for it to be able to reproduce the harms that it has been reproducing. Does that create a stronger sense of urgency
I don't think I could feel more urgent. Patience is not in any way one of my virtues, and I hope that my actions over recent days has shown that, but the government as a whole, whether that's the in the Ministry of Justice through the Crime and Policing Bill. I mean, we have.
I'm thinking particularly about transparency rather than the grok issue, which is being dealt with.
Absolutely. We are. Look, just to spell this out again, we made it illegal to share or attempt to share these images for individuals and for platforms, and it's also a priority offence now in the Online Safety Act. That's something that Peter Kyle did, my predecessor. We are criminalising the creation or asking to create these images, and we said we'll bring forward the enforcement of that this week. We are also going to criminalise the sort of underlying model through the nudification app, banning nudification apps in the Crime and Policing Bill. So we are coming at this from this is illegal, and I think it's a really. I think on this we have a very strong package of measures. If there remain gaps, I'm prepared to go further, because I think it is, abhorrent. But it is also a matter of upholding British values and upholding the law. So I believe we should be able to uphold the law of the land in this land. And I've also said previously that if we find gaps, for example, around AI chatbots, some are covered, some aren't, we'll act. I take this issue extremely seriously, because right now, you obviously raise a really important point about, well, where are they getting these images from? Right now, my primary goal is to protect women and children.
And in this committee, we're really proud of the work that Baroness Owen did in raising this and driving this issue over the last year or two.
Can I say, there are, I'm still 3 or 4 months into this role. I know that I stand on the shoulders of many others who have fought for this for many years before.
On transparency, Lisa, you said that there were insufficient technical tools. That's one of the learnings from the workshops. Yep. We heard from Ed Connolly from Cloudflare when I asked him specifically about more granular transparency. He said that he did not believe that this is technically complicated. Mm-hmm. How do you decide who you're listening to when you get the technical advice? Because you've got the vested interests of some big tech companies, and then you might have another big tech company like Cloudflare directly contradicting. How do you make your judgment?
And so that is why we set up the working groups, and why we didn't just have one, because we wanted to cast the net very widely and hear the broadest range of voices. What we have had from those working groups, although there have been some quite serious disagreements and different points of view expressed by people in them, what we found is that doesn't divide neatly into creatives versus tech companies. So, as you're alluding to, there's quite a debate going on within tech companies about how you best approach this. But to give you an example of some of the things that have been identified by the participants in those working groups as missing, they wanted... what they were asking for essentially was a triple lock approach. So metadata, watermarking, neural fingerprinting. And there were some very specific gaps that they have identified where there is going to have to be some more work on technical solutions. Now, I think your question really is, why aren't we getting on with the legislating around transparency? And
how close are you to a workable solution is in the end the background question.
And particularly because, to go back to the question about urgency, is because this was urgent when we took office 18 months ago. So there's already a really detrimental effect on both both industries as a consequence of not having clarity. So we really do recognise that, as Liz said, and I think, you know, patience, if I might agree, patience is not one of your great virtues. It's not really one of mine either.
So we love patience, yeah.
But what we don't want to do is bring forward legislation without having thought this through. And I think particularly those of you in here, all of you in here who were involved in the discussions around the data bill will appreciate that that's not where actually Parliament or government wants to be. We want to work together to find a solution that we know can hold and legislate or regulate in order to underpin that.
Let me just ask a couple of quick attempts at getting quick principle questions established. One, when you've found a workable transparency solution, do you envisage that being mandatory?
So we've previously given a commitment that we will legislate for that. We are, as Liz said, open-minded to being challenged about the assumptions that we've made, but that is our position. We haven't heard yet a reason not to do that.
Okay, thank you. And then on copyright law, previous suggestions from government that the law is uncertain has, we've heard, created somewhat of a chilling effect on the licensing market. It's been something that, as you've suggested, universally, creatives and the technical sector want certainty. So getting some certainty about licensing would be really helpful. Do you think some witnesses have told us they don't think the licensing laws should be changed at all? They're fine.
We've heard that as well in the responses.
Do you have a view on that?
Look, there's a whole. If you look at all of these issues, transparency, licensing, if there are any exemptions, if so, for whom, can they be achieved? The truth of all of this is you can't do, I understand why you're rightly tempting us down the line, but it's a package. You know, the thing is a package together. It's got to work together. Not everybody will get everything. That's the nature of this, but we have to do a package. Because picking out one bit without another, without a comprehensive look, that is what we have committed to, that it is not just on those levels. We have to have something that goes across the board here. I think that's extremely important, a way forward that delivers for both sides. We have had a lot of comment that the existing scheme works. The only caveat I would put is a point that Lisa raised earlier, which is extremely important to me too, which is the individuals, the new starters. That's where the next great bit of creativity comes from, and I really want to make sure we have a system that works for, the small players, not just the big guys. That's a real principle for us as a government. Yeah. It's got to work, not just because we're a government that believes in fairness, but we actually believe that's the next new thing. Yeah. We've got to make sure that we protect that.
I can come to Viscount Colwell. Charles.
Hi. I know you're trying to get this as a package, but there was just one specific question that I'd like to ask you. We've heard again and again about the transparency for the AI training or the training data is difficult, and that, as you've explained, is some say it is, some say it isn't. It's too difficult to do it granularly. But what they all say is that they're very worried about the complete disclosure of the training data being a security and a competition risk. Would you look at an idea that all the data training set will be put into a black box held by a regulator, held by Ofcom, and that rights holders would be able to...
I think Ofcom's got enough on its plate right now.
Held by the AI Safety Institute, then held by somebody, and that rights holders would be able to ask whether their specific content is in there. Wouldn't that solve the problem, the concerns the AI companies have about competition and security?
I mean, we're always open to any suggestions. Yeah. Just for sort of balance's sake in my answers here, we've talked a lot about issues around transparency from the creative sector. You will know already that many, particularly of the larger AI companies, are opposed to what they consider to be onerous burdens on them doing this, and they'll just carry on and do what they're doing in the States that we don't control there.
Yeah, there is a challenge here about making sure that we're working at least in some kind of synergy with what the countries are doing, and also playing a leadership role in that. But I think we'd both be really keen to hear more about it. So if we could pick up that conversation, we'd certainly, you know, as we said at the outset to this is a reset moment. We have brought people together to try to collectively solve this. We think there is a strong role for government here, but we don't think government alone can solve it. So we'd be really keen to follow up that conversation.
So this is just slightly taking it a bit further. You raise the issue we've got of US proprietary AIs being rolled out here. What about some energy to put in a UK, maybe even an open source model? I mean, we've heard about this very cheap, very effective open source model the Allen Institute have organised, called Elmo 3. Apparently, only cost 90 million pounds.
90 billion, did you say?
90 million, sorry. And that it had transparency of the training decisions made, the data being used. It seems like a wonderful model that we could use in this country, and for the government to be able to steer something like that to happen.
Well, what I would say, if I'm allowed to answer on this bit about, I really do want to see great British companies and great British ideas backed. That's not just because I'm a patriot, but because I actually believe in competition, and that I want more brilliant British companies succeeding. I think it is healthy for this country and for the world to have a strong, proud British tech sector based on our values that help lead the world and provide greater competition. I welcome inward investment from countries around the world, and we are achieving that. But I also want to see a much more vibrant. We've got a lot that we're doing to back British companies to start up, grow, expand, and succeed, and ideas around how we do that and the values and principles on which that is based. I think that's a really important debate for us to have, and I want to see more of that in this country.
We are also doing some of this ourselves. So the committee will be aware of the Creative Content Exchange, which is a model that we're about to pilot. And the thinking behind that is threefold. Firstly, that there is currently the notion of fair remuneration is contested because there isn't a marketplace for the content and data that currently exists, and so there's no agreed price. By creating a marketplace for that content and data, we think we can resolve one of those issues. Secondly, there's a genuine challenge around enforcement. At present, most of the disputes around the use of content and data is settled through the courts. That inevitably disadvantages the smaller players, that, as Liz just said, is a point of principle for this government. We think that the Creative Content Exchange can help to deal with that challenge of enforcement, particularly for smaller players. But thirdly, because we think there's a huge opportunity here, when we speak to tech companies who are developing and refining their AI models, the conversation used to be very much about quantum of data. It's now about quality of data. And the UK is a real leader because of the strength of our creative industries in high quality content and data. By opening that up in a fair and legal way to tech companies, we think we will bring huge benefits to them, attract a lot of companies from all over the world to do business with us. But also, if you think about some of the major institutions in this country, whether it's the National Archives or the British Library or the BBC, they're sitting on a gold mine of this content and data that is just simply not being used at the moment. So we think there's enormous potential here, and there's a role for the government to help, not to run this Creative Content Exchange, but to act as a catalyst to bring it into being that could be world leading if we get it right. So this idea of pushing at the boundaries of what is possible and not just learning from the experiences of other countries, but actually leading is absolutely at the centre of what we're trying to do.
Segues very nicely into a question from Tom McNally, Lord McNally.
Yes, I was very impressed by the paling of both of you when you saw that Jim Knight was on our panel. It's,
how we react to Jim most of the time.
I want to pick up this thing about the creative content exchange. Before that, a little reminiscence. I've now been in the Lords now 30 years. When I first came in, one of the personalities in the Lords then was Ted Willis, Lord Willis, who was most famous as the inventor of diction of Doc Green. But I always remember him once saying, talking about a minister, his problem was that he always carried the imprint of the last arse that sat on him. And probably an unparliamentary intervention, but it was very welcome last night, Liz, to hear I watched you making the statement and answering questions. And it was not exactly a breath of fresh air, but it was nice to hear a government statement that showed a genuine outrage and proposed some solutions to the problem. I think the problem that you two face now is that it is polarised between a creative industries of which we're very proud and create lots of stuff and etc. And a desire to do what you just said about promoting British industry more generally. And I mean, just to put it into one thing, we earlier this afternoon have been talking to one of the big sectors, and of course we can question them hard about their transparency and accountability, but the witness did throw in that they're going to invest £5 billion in the British economy, and that always carries weight. So, you know, are we trying to develop just to bring, there is a question at the end of this, by the way, but one of the earlier witnesses also said that, and I'm not exactly using his words, but we were really, you say you're taking a rain check, etc. That we've almost pulled into a lay-by, and the rest of the world is passing by, and we're talking about a change that is not in years or decades, but months. You know, I think one of you mentioned 2 or 3 years of really fundamental changes. So how do we keep up to speed on the broader thing? And so now we've come to the question. You've just given great hope in this creative content exchange as a trusted marketplace to support licensing and access to digitalized cultural assets for AI training. Is this because you feel that the present system that we've got just won't deliver that kind of cooperation? And if so, how quickly will this be up and running?
Great. Well, no, thank you. I mean, you know, in a nutshell, we think that we need more creative solutions in this space. We look at the other countries that have taken action and they've run into their own difficulties with the approaches that they've taken. And so we think we need to bring a fresh approach. But I think, Ruth,
Yeah,
you
no,
can
absolutely.
talk in more detail.
So, I mean, I think the content exchange is absolutely not a replacement for existing marketplaces that are popping up. We know that there are quite a few different marketplace ideas around there, and it's also not a replacement for existing deals. I think, as the Secretary of State outlined, there are three sort of problems that we see. I think one is data access, and in particular to really, really high quality data, and the AI firms really need that to be able to grow. And then there's that really important thing about unrealised economic value. So actually there's quite a lot of value in our cultural and creative assets, which is currently untapped. And there's an awful lot of either data which is not available for AI developers at the moment, or is not even digitised at the moment. So I think one of the things that we are trying to do through the content exchange is sort of answer that question of, we think there's lots of value in these things, is there? So it's a research undertaking. It's being funded by the UKRI through the R&D Missions Accelerator Programme, and we're sort of testing these theses almost, and the sort of the questions that we're trying to look at is there commercial value in this sort of data that a lot of our public bodies are holding? It's, you know, can you achieve a fair value exchange between those data providers and the market? And then can we then build that to scale? Because one of the other things we're keen to look at is, are there agglomeration benefits that you could get by bringing lots of different types of data together into something like the exchange? And then the final thing is, if we've proved all of this, then, as the Secretary of State was saying earlier, it then potentially provides a mechanism to enable smaller providers, and really importantly, individuals, to get access to market through a really trusted provider. So that's what we're trying to look at, but it's a research undertaking, and we'll do a pilot. We're going to launch a pilot later this month that will run for 12 months, with a review point in the middle of that, to see whether we think this is an idea that works, because we're trying something new and we're sort of testing and learning. And if that review point works, then we'll sort of look at what its sort of governance structures should be and how we would set it up, and it would then evolve into something. I think, as the Secretary of State said, we're sort of trying to incubate something quite innovative. That's
very, very helpful. Are you sure that you're not treading on toes or duplicating things that aren't already?
I mean, absolutely. What we're looking to do is sort of build on approaches that we've seen, but to answer those quite specific questions. And I think in particular, looking at, is there value in public assets that we can sort of commercialise, which hasn't been commercialised before, which then potentially has spillover benefits to helping bits of the creative industries that haven't also been able to access these sort of deals.
Yeah, and it absolutely goes back to that question at the start around what's the proper role for government in this and what's the proper role for industry. And there are quite a few public institutions that are sitting on what we think is a goldmine of content and data that could be enormously beneficial to AI companies. There isn't a level of trust there at the moment about sharing and opening that up. There also isn't an incentive to do so, because it costs money essentially to digitise and to order that data and content. That, you know, if you're an organisation that hasn't had a huge amount of funding over the last decade and a half, you would be reluctant to make a priority, but you might be incentivised to make a priority if you could see that there was value in it. So we think that there is a proper role for government here, because frankly nobody else is able to do what government can do in this space, acting, as Ruth said, as a catalyst and an incubator, not as the solution to this, but as the way of helping to bring that solution into being.
One advantage of being in the House of Lords is that you get the benefit of history. 15 years ago, I was on a joint committee, myself and Francis Maud, in the early days of the coalition, which was looking at releasing the NHS database for the benefit of mankind. And we were sunk below the waterline by the Daily Mail telling its readers that we were about to release everybody's health records to the public. it's but it's still there, and you're right. And it isn't just the NHS. We have some amazing assets there that, if properly managed, and I'm glad my recall of history is being supported by. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Jimmy's anxious to have a last word.
If there's time, but there's a question for Liz, really, which is, look, I think as a committee we all share your passion around driving growth in the economy through AI and allowing that to develop. We, as a committee, published a report on growing AI and create businesses here a year or so ago, and essentially this was an issue, but really big issues around access to compute, access to talent, access to energy, etc., etc. Do you have a sense in your prioritization of things where this sits in terms of being able to maintain, attract and grow an active AI economy?
I really do want to focus on this, and also just say something that I do want to say this, which is AI is becoming the engine of economic power and hard power, the power of nation states. And I want to make sure with my colleagues that Britain wins the right race, that we make sure that our incredible universities, researchers, brilliant startups, creative sector, life sciences, defence, financial services sees this, but that we also understand Britain's role in the world in this. And I think we have to be really realistic about the degree of power, economic and hard power, that AI brings, and that we have a role and a duty and responsibility in this country to seize the benefits, but to shape it to work for all based on our values. And I think that without growth, we don't tackle living standards, and we have no money to back our vital public services. And we will not, there is no path to better growth in this country without AI, science and tech. There isn't. So this is my, I know you are all realists in here, that is the truth of it. And we face huge changes, geopolitical changes here. And Britain's role in this is extremely important. I am very ambitious for this country, for jobs. I believe we can use this to develop jobs and growth in every part of the country. I mean, we are opening AI growth zones in the northeast, in North Wales, in South Wales. There'll be other ones coming. Jobs and growth everywhere. The main things people talk to me about are we need the compute, we need the talent, we need to keep our talent here. And we need, I believe, greater competition in the world, and I believe that we are part of that, and we need to seize these benefits. I want to do this in a way that supports our incredible creative sector, and I think actually if you could combine AI with our world-leading strengths, life sciences, creative sector, defence, financial services, that's the race we win, but we have to do it based on our values. And I want to solve this issue, as does Lisa, but we cannot lose this moment as a country to deliver for our people and to shape this technology, which will shape us, whether we like it or not. And I want it to be for the good of people in every part of the country and based on our values. We are, you know, I feel very strongly that to be in this job, in this country, at this time, is really important, because we can both win and shape this. And that's vital, I think, for the future of our people and the future of the world. So AI copyright is one extremely important part of a whole series of things that we need to do based on our values. And we are determined to deliver.
Thank you. Well, we've reached the end of our time, sadly. I'm sure we an awful lot more questions that we could have raised, but it's just to go back to say that it's heartening to see you both today and to hear what you've covered with us. We've spent a number of months on this inquiry, and we still have to write. Our team now has to write up the report, which is always the hard bit. But I think I do take heart, particularly from you talking still about the reset. That's important, because can't underestimate really that a number of the missteps that happened before have really had a chilling effect on developments. And we've touched on those here, but it's very important, the signals that are going from ministers to the outside world. And so the fact that you're still consulting, but also the fact that we need solutions. I mean, I think people are starting to say, well, really good to be consulting, but we've had a lot of consultation, we've had years and years of it. And I understand why you can't give us exact dates when we're going to see solutions, but we do want them. But I do want to touch on the points we've made about transparency and its enforcement are very important parts of finding a solution, and that's particularly come alive with the knowledge of ex-Grok and the fact that it must have trained on pornography and all kinds of horrors. And so it's not just a question of transparency will open up the remuneration solutions, but it will potentially keep children and women safe. And that licensing, certainly missteps and things that were said in the past did make a difference, and that we do need support to see licensing markets opened up. But thank you very much. I suppose we could just say, kind of go carefully through these things, but try and move to solutions that work for us.
Go carefully but quickly and definitely. Okay.
That's our mantra.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great.
Conversations that are